Okay, so we have a long session ahead of us, 3.5 hours with no break. So let's start right away. I'm happy to welcome Logan Ayagam, and he'll talk about Wilsonian boundary conditions in the fluid gravity correspondence. Please start.
Hello everyone. I should thank Tapanis for giving me this opportunity to give this talk. I would have, of course, liked to visit IIT Roorkee in person, but the times are what they are. I hope everybody is doing well. And what I wanted to tell you guys about over the next half an hour or so is some work we have been doing, in last 1 or 2 years with various collaborators, and Jwel Ghosh and Siddharth Prabhu and Vishal, they're all postdocs at ICTS. Dimple and Julio are postdocs at UC Davis, working with Mukund. And Akhil is a graduating student, like a PhD student who's graduating this year from ICTS. Okay, so what I wanted to talk to you about was an aspect of the papers that I have noted here, and it is about how to think about Wilsonian boundary conditions in free gravity correspondence. I'll explain what I mean in due course. So let me maybe start with just the title. What do I mean here by Wilsonian? So this is something that we are all familiar with in effective field theories. So it's a particular kind of a strategy to construct effective field theories. And as an illustration, I've taken a very old example, like going back a century, what is called as a Born-Oppenheimer approximation in atomic physics and chemistry and so on. So the idea is that when you have a system with some slow modes and fast modes, so fast modes are modes whose dynamics is set by a time scale which is very small, and slow modes are kind of very long-lived modes whose dynamics is very slow. And in this case, like the example that Born-Oppenheimer considered, the slow modes are the nuclei, which move very slow because they're massive objects compared to electrons, which move very fast, and whose evolution is very fast. And the idea is to first freeze the slow modes. Okay, so the idea is to understand the dynamics is to freeze the slow modes. In this case, nuclei. That is, think of nuclei as being in a very specific positions, and then you solve for the fast modes. Okay, in the slow mode background. Okay, so you kind of solve for the dynamics. So you only solve for the dynamics of electrons. We will now say that nuclei are kept off shell, and you kind of integrate out the electrons. Okay, to kind of get an effective theory. And what Born-Oppenheimer got was an effective potential for the nuclei, in the sense that effective potential where the nuclei then move, which are generated by these slow modes, which are electrons in this case. So I want to kind of think about a similar kind of, like fast slow separation and integrating out things and freezing the slow modes and so on and so forth. But in the context of fluid dynamics, it's a much more complicated problem, but conceptually the idea is the same. So you have fast modes, which are the microscopic degrees of freedom, and the slow modes are the fluid modes, which evolve at a macroscopic scale. For example, if you take a glass of water and you stir it, the microscopic molecules of water, they exhibit very fast motion at a microscopic time scale, at a very small time scales, whereas the fluid settles over, like a macroscopic time scale over a few seconds or something. Okay, and the idea is to kind of, like integrate out the fast modes and generate some effective theory for the fluid, of the fluid modes, which is essentially just fluid dynamics. Okay, and I want to, like basically think about how to do this in a dual gravitational theory when the fluid dynamics is of a CFT with a gravity dual. Okay, so the broad outline of my talk is, I have divided into like 3 parts. Okay, so in the first part, I will just be saying something about, why we should be Wilsonian in fluid dynamics, why this is a good thing to do, why this is a sensible thing to do to separate things out. I think, most of us probably already accept it's sensible, but it's useful to kind of go through this argument a bit more. And also why in practice, okay, nobody ever is Wilsonian, in the sense that whenever we derive fluid dynamics, we do not know how to actually implement the strategy I just outlined, and what are the difficulties. So that will be the first part of my talk. And in the second part, I will move on to the gravitational side, and I'll describe how gravity does it, how gravity is separate this. It's easier to separate on the gravitational side the slow modes from fast modes via a simple scalar model. Okay, so I will just describe and sketch what happens in the scalar model, what did we learn by studying the scalar model, and I will then conclude with further directions. So I kind of leave out most of the technical details and so on, for which I will refer all of you to these papers that I had in my last slide. And also, there's a talk that Akhil is supposed to give on Friday where he will cover some of the details. Okay, so let's start. So now, why should be Wilsonian fluid dynamics? Why we should kind of freeze out the fluid modes, integrate out the microscopic modes, and get this theory and so on. I mean, the one-line answer is, of course, this is the right thing to do, and you do it for the same reason that Born-Oppenheimer did Born-Oppenheimer approximation, because there is a very distinct separation of scales, and the physics become much more clearer if you separate them out. But even if you could integrate our fluid dynamics, we should not do it because the fluid dynamics are very long-lived modes. And when you integrate them out, the thing that you get will be is usually such a mess. Let's say if you calculate correlation function, integrate them out, that it's very difficult to parameterize and see what is happening if you integrate out everything, okay, including the fluid dynamic mode. So this, I think, all of us would readily accept. But despite this argument, the fact, I think, is that all current microscopic derivations of fluid dynamics, we never quite succeed in doing this separation, okay, as Wilson tells us to do. And we essentially integrate out everything. Basically, you solve the dynamics of everything. Maybe you do kinetic theory, you solve the full Boltzmann equation, and then you recast it into some hydrodynamics. That's the thing that you usually do in weakly coupled theories. Or you do something else, right? So, but the point is that we kind of essentially integrate out everything. The main reason for this is that it's very hard to actually do this separation. I mean, this is, while we all accept that the slow and the fast modes have to be separated, it is very hard to separate them as a part of a single system. Born-Oppenheimer got away with it because there were electrons and there were nuclei, and they were kind of visibly different systems. And you could just cleanly identify what the nuclear degrees of freedom are and what the electron degrees of freedom are, and kind of integrate them out in a systematic way, freeze some of them, and so on and so forth. But when you have something like a quantum field theory, and the slow and the fast modes, the microscopic degrees of freedom and the macroscopic degrees of freedom are very closely intertwined. It's very difficult to actually separate them out. Okay, and you have to kind of use quite an amount of intuition and wisdom to do that. Okay, and our life is made more difficult by the fact that actually in weakly coupled theories, which is the thing where we know how to calculate quantum field theories, everything is actually slow, because the dynamics is slow, the thermalization is slow, the scrambling is slow, collisions, because essentially to leading order is like a free theory, and in free theory basically the evolution is trivial in some sense. Okay, and any non-trivial evolution, okay, takes a long time to settle it. Let's say if you hit the theory, it takes a long time to for that energy that is given in to thermalize and so on and so forth. This is also true also of most integrable theory, which is another playground where we learn things. So basically, our luck is very bad because the two main sources from which we gain all our theoretical intuitions from, this separation is very hard in them by the nature of the systems. Okay, and in fact, in weakly coupled theory, the slow-fast distinction emerges only at very non-perturbatively long time scale. So everything is slow, but in some sense, the fast modes are kind of evolve at some non-perturbatively long time scale, and slow modes are even slower. Okay, in some sense. Okay, so unless you kind of do some desummation or something, okay, you have to be very clever to extract out something. The second reason is that unlike the standard Wilsonian effective field theories, the effective field theory that we are seeking to derive is a dissipative effective field theory. many of you have heard me talk about this. It's what we would call as an open quantum field theory, and there are various kind of peculiar features to it, which I don't want to go into today. But the point is that these differences mainly mean that we don't understand all this integrating out very well, and it is difficult to and the reason our theoretical understanding is so bad is again because we have very little examples because of the reason one, and it's difficult to construct clean examples and study the renormalization group effects and so on. So you can try to push the effective field theory paradigm as much as possible from what you know, but in the absence of clean examples, it's very hard. That life is very hard. Another reason, which is not always appreciated, but it is true, is that the fluid dynamics, which is also related to the statement that it's an open theory with dissipation and so on, is that the fluid dynamics also has slow and fast fluctuations. So, but first of all, it has fluctuations, which means that should be described like a stochastic theory, like Langevin theory or something. Another thing which is true about it is that these fluctuations also show a slow fast separation. There are slow fluctuations and there are fast fluctuations. Okay, so all fluctuations are not the same, and one needs to separate out those fluctuations also. Okay, in principle, and we don't understand the fluctuation very well to the extent even we understand fluid dynamics. Fluid dynamics we basically get by because of experiments. These fluctuations are not experimentally measured also, so we don't know how to separate them slow, fast, even at an intuitive level. Okay, we just know that they probably should exist in principle, and that's it. Okay, so we do not yet know how to implement the Wilsonian strategy in fluid dynamics, and this has terrible consequences. This means that our kind of understanding our calculations on deriving fluid dynamics are kind of messy. And so basically, the usual thing that one does, one opens a textbook or one of the standard references where people calculate viscosities of various things like large and gauge theory, say. Okay, you open this paper, what you see is that basically you integrate out everything else, you calculate the correlators, and because you've integrated all the slow modes also and fluctuations and everything, you get some correlators with some complicated IR divergences. And then you kind of squint at it to see how to extract out hydrodynamics out of it. Okay, a lot of times Largen helps. Okay, you can kind of kill the fluctuations by hydrodynamics. You can kind of look at the Largen counting and kind of separate out the fluctuation contributions to kill the IR divergences and extract out by Kubo formulae the viscosity and so on, which is what mostly people do. Okay, but once you kind of go beyond Largen. Or once you want to take into actually study these fluctuations rather than just throwing them out, just like that. Okay, you do not know what to do. So the fact is, the hydrodynamics, stress tensor, fluid dynamics cannot even be defined within a Wilsonian framework. Okay, in the sense that usually ordinary books say, oh, you take the stress tensor, you look at such and such a structure, you say this is pressure, this is viscosity, and so on. But actual stress tensors, if you actually include fluctuations and so on, are horribly IR divergent, and you can't identify anything. Okay, you can identify probably viscosity, but the viscosity that you identify at long distances is, would have with fluctuations is very different from the Wilsonian viscosity. So one should kind of distinguish between the 1 pi viscosity and the Wilsonian viscosity. And this 1 pi, so to speak, one particle irreducible, where you integrated everything in analogy with quantum field theories. Okay, one particle irreducible hydrodynamic coefficients are not even well defined. They're all kind of horribly IR divergent. It's very similar to what happens when we think about S matrices in QED or something, where you have the soft modes, and you have to be very careful. You have to ask the correct question to get the right answer, and it's not always clear what the correct question is. Okay, so the infrared structure we don't understand, and so for these reasons, we are, though we all, I think, everybody in the field, we understand that, that one needs to be Wilsonian and one needs to separate them out to get a sensible answer. In practice, one doesn't know how to do it. And then one kind of tackles them, and one does things like going to Largen and then throwing out things that create trouble for you and so on and so forth. Okay, which is not very satisfactory. Okay, So the question that I want to ask today is whether is there anything that you can learn from gravity? Okay, so this is on the side of field theory, and as I said, like weakly coupled field theory, by its very nature, this separation is very hard to study in that framework. Okay, so it's natural to ask, now that we know ideas CFT and so on, whether we can recast this problem into gravity and make progress. So if the fluid dynamics is that of a CFT, of a conformal field theory with a gravity dual, then the fluid dynamics is basically the study of slowly varying black hole solutions, okay, on the dual gravitational side. Okay, and the question is that how do we think about slow modes and fast modes on the other side, and whether they're cleanly separated, and whether we can understand how these things are, how these things work. One main reason for optimism is that gravity is dual to a strongly coupled theory. Classical gravity is dual to a strongly coupled theories. Okay, and strongly coupled theories, for the same reasons that I had described a few slides ago, their timescales, there the timescales are much more cleaner, because at strong coupling, these slow modes and fast modes are the separation is very much cleaner, because the timescales are shorter in strongly coupled theories. Okay, the timescales of fast modes really are fast. They die out fast, like in strongly coupled theories. And the idea is to kind of learn how such modes interact and how these things work, and hopefully, that will tell us how to disentangle even the weakly coupled problem, or maybe intermediate coupling problem in some way. Okay, so that is the hope. So in these works that in last year and before that, I and my collaborators, we showed that this Wilsonian strategy can indeed be implemented at a quadratic level, at a leading order. Okay, and you can do separate slow and the fast modes. Okay, so you have to what it requires is that you have to write down the Einstein-Maxwell equations of the black brane, and you have to separate them in a clean way. And remember, I told you that the fluctuations also come in the slow and the fast versions. What that means is that the Hawking modes, okay, the Hawking modes, which also you should solve for to understand the fluctuations in the hybridynamics, also come in slow and the fast versions. So you have to separate out the Hawking modes also into slow Hawking modes and fast Hawking modes, okay, which people usually don't think about, but the fact is that it's just a direct consequence of hydrodynamics that the fluctuations, the Hawking modes also should separate into slow and fast Hawking modes. And what we showed was that indeed you can separate them, and you can integrate out the dynamics of the fast modes, both the fast like infalling modes and the Hawking modes, and write down some effective theory for the slow infalling modes and the Hawking modes. Okay, and I will not kind of describe the details, but this is what we did. You can look at the paper or at this talk on Friday. But what I want to talk to you about, over rest of the time I have, is a simple scalar model which basically captures the essential features of what is happening without going into all the details about gauge fixing, Gauss constraints, and all these things. You can look at your paper. Okay, I mean, you have to kind of do it in some clever way and separate things out in a clever way to get it working. But the point is that I just want to talk to you about basically the basic some simple scalar model where this fast mode slow mode separation and what happens there is kind of clearer. Okay, so maybe I will just pass here and ask are there any questions, comments at this juncture?
So is the field theory a weakly coupled theory or a strongly coupled theory?
I want to do gravity, so it can't be a weakly coupled theory, right? I mean, classical gravity.
No, the dual theory.
That's what I'm saying. So the dual theory has to be strongly coupled to get a classical gravity. So
okay, it's a strongly coupled theory. Okay.
Yeah, and I want a strongly coupled theory because I want this fast slow separation. It's much cleaner in strongly coupled theories.
But for fluids, is it strongly coupled or weakly coupled?
Sorry, I don't understand the fluid modes. I mean.
Yeah, I mean, you're trying to address the fluid gravity correspondence, right? So ultimately, you're concerned with the fluid dynamics.
Yes, on gravity.
So is that
I'm also concerned about gravity.
Yeah, so is that a strongly coupled or a weakly coupled?
I'm not sure whether that distinction makes much sense. Fluid dynamics is an effective theory, okay, and in some sense, you know, the fluctuations in fluid dynamics are kind of suppressed. It's like a statistical theory. It is suppressed by 1 by n, and 1 by n is always small in fluid dynamics. So in some sense, okay, what I'm saying is that fluid dynamics by definition is always kind of weakly coupled, or else you don't have fluid dynamics or something. Because of this 1 by n, because the fluctuations to the mean behavior are always suppressed by some Avogadro number. So, yeah.
So the gravity would not apply here. The gravity.
Can we please undergo this discussion in the discussion session? And Loga, you have 5 minutes more.
Okay, yeah, right, okay, so yeah, so yes, maybe then I should proceed. I'll maybe, you know, like come back to it in the okay. So the point here is that, you know, like so let me take the scalar system and the question. So consider an ADS black brane with an ingoing edited Finkelstein coordinates, and what you can do is that, you know, like so here V and X are the CFT coordinates, and you can write down a scalar system. This is basically like a Klein-Gordon equation, but a one parameter cousin of Klein-Gordon equation, and this one parameter is this m, which is an integer. So when m is d minus 1, okay, this is basically the Klein-Gordon equation in the ADS black brane. Okay, so you have a one parameter family of these scalars, and the basic claim here is that, you know, like by tuning this parameter m, you know, like we can make this phi m, you know, like represent a slow mode or a fast mode, and we can understand, you know, like how those slow modes and fast modes work in gravity by just studying these equations. Okay, so, you know, like so basically the idea is that, you know, like, yeah, there's a particular value of m for which you get a fast mode. For particular ranges of m, you get slow modes. Okay, and this might look like a kind of completely rigged up example, but many actual, you know, like systems of interest reduce to these things actually, and even like what I've described, that, you know, the many Maxwell sectors and gravitational sectors actually reduce to such scalar equations, and more importantly, you know, like even if it doesn't reduce, I think it kind of captures something essential about how gravity treats these slow modes and fast modes, which I think is important. So the only fact we will need, you know, like today, is this statement. That the standard GKPW boundary condition, which frees the non-normalizable modes, reduced to Dirichlet boundary conditions on the fast modes and the normal boundary conditions on the slow modes. So in some sense, the gravity already knows about, you know, the fast modes and slow modes, and you get like the Dirichlet modes and Dirichlet boundary conditions and normal boundary conditions on the slow modes. And the main claim that I want to make, which we substantiate in detail in these works, is that the Wilsonian boundary condition, which means you should let the dynamics of the fast mode be whatever it is. So we just let it be Dirichlet boundary conditions, but we want to freeze the slow modes, right? You know, we want to freeze the dynamics of slow modes and take them off shell. And the statement is that, you know, like you can make them off shell by converting the normal boundary conditions on those slow modes to kind of Dirichlet boundary conditions, so that you impose Dirichlet boundary conditions on all the fast modes and the slow mode scalars. Okay, so the statement is that, you know, like the Wilsonian boundary conditions just amount to Dirichlet boundary conditions on this scalar system, on this phi. Okay, so for the want of time, let me just skip this slide. Okay, and let me just summarize, you know, like so for how, you know, like this system looks like from the gravitational side. So you have this mode, you know, like I have just divided into the case where there's a fast mode and case where there's slow mode. Here the pi is the conjugate field to the phi, okay, which you can write on an action and define canonical conjugate. Okay, and the point is this, that the GKPW boundary conditions, the standard non-normalizable mode boundary conditions, impose Dirichlet boundary conditions on the fast modes and normal boundary conditions on slow modes. And as I said, the Wilsonian boundary conditions amount to imposing Dirichlet boundary conditions on both of them. And this is also, you know, equivalent to the statement that that for the fast modes, okay, the force is the scalar itself, whereas, you know, like for the slow modes, the force should be thought of as the like as the conjugate field, because like the GKPW boundary condition tells us that the non-normalizable mode should be fixed, and the non-normalizable mode actually sits in the conjugate field for these slow modes, okay, which is opposite of what happens in the usual ADS-CFT. And the point is that then you have to solve for this, okay. And the idea is that what we find is that you can always, for any m, you can solve the system by usual ADS-CFT things, in small omega k expansion, and you can always get a small omega k expansion for pi m, boundary value of pi m, in terms of the boundary value of phi m. Okay, so you can get like pi m equal to some omega square, k square, something times phi m in the Fourier domain. Okay, and what that means for the fast modes is that you have expressed the expectation value, okay, of this operator in terms of some local expression, some derivative expression in terms of the source, which kind of justifies the statement that it's fast modes, and it has very short correlations, and hence it can be derivative expanded. Whereas for slow modes, the same expansion should be interpreted in the opposite way. That what you have done is that you have expanded the source in terms of some derivatives acting on the expectation values. Okay, like of the operator. But what does that mean? That basically means that what you have written down is a dynamical equation for the expectation value, where you've said that some derivatives acting on the expectation value is equal to the source. Okay, and this is a characteristic of a slow mode. For example, if it's a diffusion equation, what you get is that in the terms of the source, you get a dynamical equation, right? Which if you solve it, you will get a very long-lived diffusion, which will take a long time, okay, depending on the wavelength. And if your source is very small, slowly varying, the solution will be as slowly varying as the source. Okay, so that's the point. Okay, the point is that so that's what we find. And this is how gravity basically implements this distinction between the fast modes and slow modes. It seems to take basically the same class of equations, and by just changing indices, you go from fast modes to slow modes. We also have examples in Charles cases where sometimes this indices kind of changes as you kind of go into the bulk and so on and so forth. Okay, so there's if you're thinking about in terms of the scalar systems, actually it's a very useful thing. Okay, so since I'm kind of at the end of my time, let me just conclude with the summary and so on. Okay, so what I did was I presented I kind of showed you a scalar system, okay, which is much simpler than solving Einstein equations or Maxwell equations, like in the Black-Bent background, which already shows this kind of a fast slow distinction, and in terms of which you can actually understand how the fast modes and slow modes work within the Wilsonian paradigm, and how they get separated within fluid dynamics. And one can so this is just solving free theory. You can start adding interactions, and we studied interactions in a paper 2 years ago, 1 year ago, and the point is to extend this and try to understand. One future direction is to extend this and understand how fast modes interact with slow modes and how they mix and so on and so forth, and it seems doable because of the separations. There are also other extensions where the slow mode can be some kind of a non-Fermi liquid and so on and so forth from a holographic side. But since I'm out of time, I will just leave this slide and just conclude here. So the basic idea, to just say in one sentence, is that there's a way to implement the Wilsonian strategy on the gravitational side by changing the boundary conditions, and you can do it at the scalar system and study. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Loga. So we have time for a couple of questions. I don't see any hands raised, but you can unmute yourself and ask, or raise your hand.
Sunil, can I ask a small question?
Actually, Sachin just raised his hand.
Okay.
You can just ask and then you. Yeah, Sachin.
Okay. Hello. So, for you, it was very important to work at strong coupling so that you can actually separate out the scales, and for that you went to gravity. But there are some models where in field theory, which are maybe exactly solvable models, where you can look at strong coupling and would you be able to do similar stuff there without using gravity?
Yeah, actually, like it would be good to have some kind of integrable models where, like this can be done. Okay. The point is that though a lot of so what you need is an integrable model, but which kind of thermalizes. Okay. Something like SYK or something, which are not easy to come by. I mean, solvable model, maybe not integrable, solvable models where, like you can capture. Because most solvable integrable models, they don't thermalize. They just have too many conserved quantities. And everything is just slow, and it doesn't help. It's as bad as the free theory,
Okay.
But it is possible that like with effort we can find some models, okay, some higher dimensional analog of SYK where you can study these things in some solvable way. That would be good.
So just one example. Suppose I take 3D Chern-Simons matter theories. Those are at large n at least. Although the transport coefficient will be very, very suppressed 1/n, etc. But would that be a kind of, because there you can solve things, right?
Yeah, but you have a lot of higher spin conserved currents, which will all not let the system relax. Basically, okay. even if they are like only weakly even if they are like conserved only to a limited extent, already that it means that that's a problem even in free theory, right? Basically, like too many conserved quantities, and so the fast modes cannot decay fast enough. Okay, so you have to wait until this conservation goes out, and fast modes decay, and that takes some non-perturbatively long time, and you are not in good shape.
Thanks. We can move on to Alok's question and then Sheshanshu, and then we'll stop. So Alok, please.
Yeah, Logan, hi. Just a small question. So if we, from the hydrodynamics perspective, if you look at in your Wilsonian paradigm, if you look at some collective excitation, then is there a bulk? I don't know if there's a bulk understanding of collective excitation of slow-moving modes. I mean,
well, so basically, what happens? This is the thing. How gravity separates the weakly coupled and slow and the fast modes is that basically, like you have these modes which are falling directly into the black hole, okay, and they die down, okay.
Yes.
Then there are modes which hover around, okay, and then they last long, and in some sense, collective modes are the modes that hover around somehow.
Okay.
Okay.
I see.
So yeah. So that seems to be how the gravity geometrizes this stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's move on to Sheshanshu. Please ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So you said that you can see the Pauli exclusion principle from the gravity side. Can you please say a quick word on that?
Yeah. So what happens is that, okay, I will just say 2-3 words, but you can just look at these references. Okay, so what happens is that you can kind of replace this black hole by some kind of like what is called some kind of a gravitational Schwinger-Keldy geometry, some kind of instituton, and what we see is that like you basically in that way of looking at it, you kind of have two exteriors of the black holes, and what you look at for these kind of factors to come in is how, when you kind of throw in stuff from one side, how things come out of the other side. Okay, and when you compute this scattering thing, you see that the fermions come with an extra phase, which exactly then like implements the Pauli exclusion. That's a short answer. Okay, but maybe yeah, you can look at Akhil's talk and like where like he probably described this geometry and so on and so forth, and how this thing works. Or you can look at these references that I have just given.
Okay, thanks, Luga. We have to move on now.